So I just thought of a couple more things that the stupids aren't mentioning. And one of them is that Vladimir Putin was feeling as confident as he was in relation to the United States because he just saw what Joe Biden had done in Afghanistan. Obviously, right? I mean, okay, so that's something the stupids aren't mentioning. They're not mentioning the profiteering from weapons manufacturers. Let's see, what else? Maybe just that. Okay, the stupids aren't mentioning that if Donald Trump was the president of the United States, he probably wouldn't have a war in the first place. Because Donald Trump would have sat down with Vladimir Putin. I guess Joe Biden has probably done that too. But he would have sat down with him and he would have hammered out some kind of a deal. He would not have pushed NATO into Ukraine, which is as strenuously as anybody else did. Trying to get... That's aggression. Russia sees that as aggression. And Trump was against it. So one of the main reasons that Putin invaded is he saw a chance to get his empire back. And he saw that the West was weak. That the West was weak and also being aggressive. Like, it's almost as if... it's not almost as if... The West deliberately created the war in Ukraine because they don't give a shit about the Ukrainians. Obviously not. Or you wouldn't have pushed them into the situation that they're in now. Where Ukrainians are letting just women and children out at this point, right? Yeah, it wouldn't be happening. Wouldn't be happening. If Trump was president, you wouldn't have a war. And he would have deprived them of the income that they needed to fight the war because he would have insisted that Europe buy oil from the United States. So Putin couldn't afford it, wouldn't have seen the opportunity because there's no way that Trump would have done what Biden did in Afghanistan. Trump wouldn't have provoked Putin, gave him wouldn't have threatened Russia and Putin, and would have sat down with them and hammered out a deal. There's a third thing that Trump wouldn't have done, and I forget what it was. He wouldn't have pushed NATO as hard. He would have insisted that Europe buy more oil from Canada, maybe even the United States. The United States was a net exporter, and now they're a net importer. So when Trump was the boss, they produced more oil and sold it than they bought. I don't know how all that works. But like, you got a situation in Canada, Trudeau was standing up and saying, well, we weren't buying that much oil from Putin. And there's just the old school people saying, what are we doing buying any? Why were we ever buying oil from Putin? Why was Canada ever doing that? Like, even a drop. Canada should be able to produce its own oil. I mean, that is just so ridiculous. It's been ridiculous forever. Canada's buying oil from Putin so that he can build up a military to attack Ukraine, and eventually he wants all of it back. So it's 4 or 5 different countries, I think. Whatever was lost when the Soviet Union collapsed, Putin wants it back. And he's not going to get it. He's going to take part of Ukraine. And if you say, I guess people fight over territory, but the shorter that war is, the less people suffer, for sure. You don't want to raw them forever. They have to accept that they're going to lose territory, and they should negotiate how much territory that's going to be. And that's easy to say if it's not your territory, of course, but that's what's going to happen. They're going to have to compromise and negotiate with Putin. Although Victor Davis Hanson says that the military, all of that, is absolutely perfect in the first little while. So I believe that. There's some people you just know they know more than you do. So, but eventually, you do have to get around to sitting down and negotiating with him and compromising. He's not a guy that you want to push too tightly into a corner. Obviously, he's psychotic. He's not psychotic. I don't think he is psychotic. I think he's a little evil. He's a little evil, and he's incredibly ambitious, and he's incredibly powerful, and he's been powerful for so long that he's... I wouldn't say that he's completely corrupt. Because I would imagine that he cares about Russians, right? I believe that. And so the longer that the war drags on, the more Russian people are going to have to contend with less. Russians are not going to be able to eat. Has anybody mentioned that? Like, nobody. I haven't seen anybody. It's a kind of a Cold War mentality. Biden says that, the American economy will just beat them like they did in the last Cold War. That's not a great solution, because you're spending money that should have been spent on hospitals and schools on military equipment. This stuff is so old, and it doesn't seem to get mentioned. Anyway, these are some of the things that the stupids aren't mentioning recently.